Hello, everybody. I am Jennifer Lentfer, and I'm here today with our IG Live, and going to invite my colleague and friend Amanda Lindemood. Today's discussion is going to be about, in these times of uncertainty, continue. How do we relate to investing in ourselves? This is a time when a lot of people are losing their jobs, losing their incomes, and that can bring up a lot of fear. Having been laid off myself, it's bringing it all back for me. And yeah, we just want to talk a little bit about that and share what we're thinking in terms of putting it all in a greater context and a longer history. In my sector, international aid and philanthropy, we have just so many people really struggling to come to the reality of what this looks like without an institution that holds the center of the thing. And we're just going to go ahead. It looks like Amanda's having trouble joining. So I'm going to check in with her, and then we'll get started here in just again. Let me try one more time. Oh, hold on. This is the liveness of it all. Okay, hold on just one second. Here she is. There we go.
Hello.
Hi, Amanda. Welcome.
Welcome. Well, thank you for welcoming me.
Just trying to set a little bit of the context for our question today, which is why take on investing in yourself during times of uncertainty? Why does that matter? It feels counterintuitive, maybe even when livelihoods and salaries and jobs are under threat or gone. So I don't know how you relate to that question, but why don't you start us off?
Yeah. I mean, I think first and most importantly, I would be insincere to not acknowledge that this is a devastating dilemma, period. And I would never want to say anything that makes light of that. I think the metaphor that I would sort of begin us with is when I think about everything I understand about workplaces, when I think about all the things that are occurring in our world and in ourselves that shape and influence work, it feels like relating to this kind of uncertainty more like turbulence on an airplane that is going to feel intense and then you're going to get over a difficult patch is an inappropriate comparison. I think more accurately, this version of destabilization, of taking things that maybe we assume are only true for certain kinds of work, like entrepreneurship or small businesses, and applying that to all kinds of work, I think is a difficult assumption to really let materialize because it feels scary, right? It feels like maybe the categories and the logic that we've used to even pick what kind of work we wanted to do is sort of being thrown in our faces, right? And that there isn't necessarily a version of work that provides us financial security, provides us career or sector security, provides us the kind of balance with our stress that we would like. And so if I relate to it that way, if I relate to this period of time as an indication of a climate of work that is going to be with us and we have to figure out how to adjust to, that means that these decisions about where to spend money and how to take on new expenses are not luxuries, right? They are these kind of litmus tests of like, what is going to help me sustain myself in work for 3 months, for 3 years, for 13 years. If all of the things that I've gotten really comfortable in are in flux again, right? If the things that make me successful at work are more unknown because I don't really have such trust that I'm going to be able to do even the same kinds of jobs, that means that the skill sets that we have are underdeveloped. And what I think is the good news in that is that there are more transferable skill sets than we might be used to thinking of, right? There are things that don't have to relate to our specific subject areas or even our past roles that are going to support us relationally and cognitively in lots of new environments. But what they're going to have in common is that we're going to have to be able to tolerate different amounts of stress. We're going to be able to differentiate between what is a general crisis, what is a situational crisis, what can we control and influence, and what can we not, what can we do by ourselves and what can we not, what is a learning curve versus no amount of learning can compensate for what is continually changing or impermanent. We need peer spaces that help us take away some of the embarrassment and exasperation so that we can just learn, right? If we're so exhausted that the thought of learning, the thought of spending money on learning, the thought of more time for learning, if we can't get past that, we're gonna stay in this place where we're sort of sabotaging ourselves, right? Where some of the destabilization is unknown, but also some of it we have to decide that there are more things to reach for than just our trusted list, right? It's not only going to be that we can apply for new jobs. It's not only going to be that we can, weather this moment of making or earning less, right? It might be that there's a long period of making less than we want to be making. It might be long periods of not knowing how to get over the disillusionment, right? And I guess the only thing I would offer is is the choice to do that in the most lonely way possible or not.
Mm, that's really hitting me. That's really hitting me. I have been an independent consultant since late 2019, and I still have moments of extreme fear about income. You know, we had talked about in our consultant space yesterday the best and worst parts of being a consultant. The worst part that always comes up is the valleys and the mountains of income and how to plan for that. And before, that was always something you could just, there was enough underlying stability to kind of keep knowing that it will come. And all of that faith that I have in the ebbs and flows has been tested over the last few months. So I'm really am identifying with everyone who's losing their job, probably maybe for the first time. That is so scary. And I always, I always say to people, like, I can never assume what someone else's financial situation is. I don't know what caregiving duties and expenses they have. I don't know what debt they have. I don't know what future plans they have. I don't know anything about anyone else's income and financial situation. My mom worked at a bank once, and our local bank in our small town, and they always said the only thing that will ever get you fired is if you talk about someone else's finances, which just shows you what a culture I grew up in. And at the same time, one, let's talk about money more freely. Let's see it as a resource that is in flow as opposed to in accumulation. Capitalism, we are living in the time of capitalism where we have equated security with finance, and it's been revealed for many years now how shaky that is. It is now being directly shaken in so many ways. And so it's time to get good at sharing, is what I say to my local friends all the time. Like, how do we create the flow amongst us to be more easeful, to be more generous, to to trust in the sufficiency that will come, that faith I was speaking of. But I also am taking this time of my own fear to really question what is enough, and to be in relationship to different numbers. And to not let the fear constrict us. I think there's something to be unlearned here deeply around what can be possible with what's here, and how do I make sure other people are okay so that I can be okay too. Like that, to really understand that in a system of belonging and sharing and reciprocity is a foundation of the way we want to do business as a couple of consultants here in the world. It's what we've learned about being being part of mutual aid networks. It's what we've been a part of as learning from people, particularly from myself, from the global south, around the solidarity economy and how that functions. And so I'm like, in some ways, I can't join the efforts that are like, bring back my job, get a new job. There's a lot of that energy happening around the closure of USAID, for example. What else do you need is the question we're asking folks. Is like, do you really, I think you said this last week, do you really want to return to that inbox from hell? Do you really want to return to the boss you can't stand, or the coworker who, like, what about our workplaces are we, if it's only finances that is like driving us to get another job, and if those jobs just aren't going to be available, there's a retooling, a reskilling that I think is vital. And I think that's what we are doing here in our cohorts, in our upcoming cohorts. So I'm wondering, Amanda, would you just share a little bit about our 14-week cohort that begins in March?
Sure.
It is March. Wait, it
It
is March.
is February. It's every month. It genuinely is the shortest month, but it really felt like that.
For sure.
Sure, I would be happy to. Yeah, I'm very both grateful and sad that this cohort feels so on time. Right? We dreamed it up not in this moment, but for moments like this where there is a need for, I think, three things. For a space where your learning is not within your existing relationships, a place where you have a long enough amount of time on a topic that you can can really kind of take your time with the introspection, but not so much time that it's a conversation just with yourself, right? That, over the course of about 3 months, you can move in and out of quiet and sharing and hearing from others without it being a sprint, right? And that some of that time can also hold the pivoting of what's going to occur that is going to test everyone, that you also just need a space to gather, right? And a space that is predictable in some ways, that you can trust that however you decide to participate, there's room for that, right? There's room for you to admit that this is a very vulnerable time to be alive. And there's nothing especially specific about that, but perhaps some of the consciousness is more specific than we're used to talking about directly. This cohort is a space to introduce some of the scholarship around the framework of organizational trauma and some of the ways that that has been evolved and continued, both with the original researchers and researchers that have added their own experience and attention to that. You don't often get to see those collaborations with all those people still alive. And organizational trauma is one of those models where that cross-pollination is happening right now. And in a way that, thank goodness, is not only being shaped by the last 5 or 10 years, right? But now is the last 40 years, but still within our lifetimes, right? And maybe even like our livelihood time, right? There's an opportunity to look at what are the characteristics that we're being socialized into at work, and how do we recognize them? And whether you're an insider or an outsider, like whether you're a consultant like us or you are fully employed by an organization, how do we have some of these concept maps that let us recognize, I really want to reach for this tool, but something tells me it's not going to meet this moment. And I want more than just my gut to help me know why, right? Or there's something that I've experienced at workplaces that I don't want to feel that's used to, but I need some help learning how to not find it normal, to not find it something that I just bear and get used to, right? Yeah. That I want to be able to tell the difference between when can I advocate for myself or draw boundaries, and when is that never going to be sufficient, right? When does the way that I feel equipped have to look different depending on what you're detecting is present, right? And that means we have to be more in the weeds of situations. That means we have to overlay different concepts at the same time. That means we can't just rely on our instincts and our emotions. And we can't only look at the stories from our work experience. We need to begin to notice patterns and trends. And that is a really hard thing to think more when stress is this high and there's no indication that it's going to decrease, right? So it's another skill to think complexly while stress is intolerable and accumulating, and it is also taking over the capacities of the people you would go to for support or instruction or as your escape route, right? the testing that is being felt individually is extending to all the networks of care and structure. And so you can't safety plan by just finding where's the secure thing that I can grab onto. Who can throw me, a life jacket, and then I can take my turn, right? Like that logic, that perhaps lived experience that has allowed that kind of reliance on each other. Our resources are not in place like that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, emotionally, relationally, that is not the design, but that's also not the model that feels trustworthy, right? And so there's mental barriers, there's emotional blockages, there's logistical barriers, there's relationship ruptures, right? There's all of that. And I keep going back to what I hope doesn't sound like optimism, but is really more, this is also true. It is also true that the creativity isn't something we have to think of for the first time right now. And so we don't need to have it all ourselves. We don't have to look at the blank page and imagine what we want to draw on it. We get to look at some created pictures and say, you know what? That speaks to me today, right? Or I know someone I want to give this picture to, right? And it doesn't have to be the labor of starting from scratch or the protection of guarding what you have right now and distinguishing yourself so that it's only an ability to compete with each other, right? There's a way that we can have a niche that makes it possible to have things that we're the right thing for and things we're not the right thing for. And that doesn't have to mean that we're stepping on each other's toes. And that is not something that you can think about when you are just trying to hold on to the resources you have, right? And so to go back to that first question of why right now, because we wouldn't hold on to it by ourselves. It would be the least protected thing in our lives is our learning. And so there has to be a little bit of structure and a little bit of initiative so that it's not the thing that goes away when we're looking at our day and thinking about where can I pull energy from to get through right now, right? It's always going to be the thing we let go of first if there isn't some container and relationships that are a part of it.
I distinctly remember when COVID hit, during doing some writing that was kind of oddly optimistic about we can do it differently now. I've always been that advocate for questioning why are we doing it this way, and is that the thing, and so it felt like such a welcoming of those questions. But what we found over time is that it just was an opportunity to extract more from people. And we saw that in overt ways, in certain like sectors and certain kinds of jobs. But I think it's hitting the professionals a bit later. It's hitting now. That idea that we can't just keep pouring into this thing that is voracious. Burnout culture is a symptom of a voraciousness of capitalism that says, I need more, better now, more, better now, more, better now. And we've built our institutions are built on this idea that there can be better solutions, there can be more resources, there can be, bigger energy. That's just untrue.
Yeah, and I I feel a little conflicted about even saying this, but I would say that work has also picked up on this idea of imitating the family, right?
In the nonprofit spaces, especially. Yes.
Well, but I think not even just nonprofit spaces,
Really?
right? It's this conversation about what creates the need to trust without explanation. What creates the purpose that is just about an in-group? What creates the worth it feeling when
Mm,
everything that you're being conditioned to experience doesn't feel good, but something that is going to be left behind holds promise, right?
mm,
Or what creates um, this sort of unspoken fear of change or loss or maturing, right? Um, this this hold in time feeling of like I want this moment of how we are to remain forever. That that's part of family imagery. That is
mm,
part, whether it's to heal an experience, whether it's to repeat an experience, whether it's to create a dream space, all of that is still trying to get us to find cognitive dissonance not stressful, right? To find something that we are saying to ourselves and something that's being said to us
mm.
that even when they're not congruent, it feels totally fine, right? Um, and it feels like you're on the path, right? That anything more than that is too much to hope for or is not like it is not being considerate of like others doing or trying their best,
Mhm.
right? There's there is a conversation to be had about like are, where does intentionality get noticed in this time, right? Like where is there conversation about is is it only responsible to um, sort of think about like the next right thing, or do we have to think about like five right things at once, right? And I think what comes out in our value led communities when things are really hard is that we reduce to we can only think in the immediate, right? We can only think one thing at a time. But our values actually are meant to help us think through lots of things together, right? And that it can't just be in times of celebration, right? That has to include times of devastation too.
Yeah. It is absolutely a devastating time for so many. And I think our instinct, I don't know how deep it goes. How is it like it's just a very human thing? Or is it conditioned? I'm not sure. But the instinct becomes to constrict, save, and to be sure, we should all be taking, probably I should also myself be taking some cutback measures to my life in this moment. But where I don't want people to misinvest is to really think through what's needed, what's possible, and how am I going to contribute to the next iteration of how we relate to each other in the world. Because this thing is crumbling, and uh, our ways of working and the ways that we understand them is being deeply challenged. What we want to do is invite the people who are like, yeah, isn't there some other way? And in fact, there are many ways, and there are many lineages to draw from, and there are it is very it's very logical to invest in yourself right now. To invest in how do I want to unlearn, relearn, expand myself instead of constrict. I think that's the real invitation to our cohort, which begins in a couple weeks. And yeah, I just want to pause here and say thank you, Amanda, for being with us. And we hope people can give it some consideration and spread the word, because there are alternatives, there are options, and most importantly, there is practice for which we need other people. And don't go it alone. Let's join up and gather. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Thank you too.
Bye.